Hello and welcome back to the Little Craft House. My name is Nicole and today we will once again be talking about polymer clay. So today's inspiration comes from my huge collection of polymer clay shape cutters. Mind the mess on the table. Lots of cutters. I don't get to use all of them all the time. I have a bunch of cutters that don't get as much love as they should. Some of them being the little smaller ones, and also some of the larger ones. So I tend to use the medium sizes when I'm doing my earrings. So today I thought I will have a play around and try and find some uses for these smaller and larger cutters. So today's tutorial is a little bit more of a watch me make inspiration tutorial. So hopefully you guys will get a bit of inspo out of this, and it's not a full tutorial making a set of earrings from start to finish. I'm just going to do the slab element. Just more for inspiration, and hopefully it'll give you guys some ideas and also me some ideas for the future as well. So I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. Let's get into it and let's get making. I decided to stay nice and simple with our colours today. So we're just going to use packet colours. So a combination of the Sculpey Primo and Sculpey Souffle brands. So we've got the yellow one that's there. That is a Souffle Yellow Ochre. I've got Primo Bronze. I've got Primo Butter Yellow. We also have Primo Khaki Green, and this one here is the Primo Souffle French Pink. So some of those are the newer colours. They are all beautiful and they all match in so nicely together. So I'm going to start by just cutting off a chunk of each of these colours. So the pink is going to be my base, so I do need a bigger piece of that colour, and then the rest of them I'm just going to do a small-ish slither. Then I'll just use my acrylic roller and get these all nicely conditioned up so that they are ready to be used. I always try and start with the lighter colours first, just to try and help to avoid any colour transfer. Doesn't always work, but I do have a pack of wipes handy that I can clean down my surfaces if need be. These lighter colours like this butter yellow, the ivory, the whites, all those sorts of colours are really bad for getting dirty. You can just see every little bit of dust and lint and colour that just jumps onto them. Now, one thing about the bronze is that when you first start using it, you can see that it's got these stripes of colour within it. It doesn't look that appealing to start with, it never does. But after giving it a few runs of conditioning, so just over a few times with the roller or through the pasta machine, you start to notice that those colours all blend nicely together and you end up with this beautiful shimmery bronzy colour, and it is absolutely gorgeous. Okay, so onto our first base. Now I do say first base because we're going to be doing a lot of layering today. So what I'm going to do is pop the pink through the pasta machine, and it's about at the halfway setting. So I don't want this overly thick, but I also don't want it thin. So I'd say that's probably about 1.5 to 2 millimeters thick. Now the other base that we're going to create is going to be black. So once again, I'm just going to cut a chunk of the black off, and I'm just going to get that conditioned up, and I will do that through the pasta machine at about the same thickness as that pink one as well. Now, just for the sake of aesthetics for this video, I'm just going to trim this down so that it is a nicer rectangular shape. But obviously you don't have to trim all those edges, only if you want your outer edges to be nice and straight. So back to the colours, I'm going to use my hand roller again to roll out each of the colours except for the green, and I want them to be quite thin. So the thinnest setting on my pasta machine isn't quite thin enough, so I'm just using my roller. Right, so when it comes to the green, I've made this piece a little bit thicker. So I've just sort of conditioned him up and got him in a bundle there. And just see like that. So he's probably about 4 mil thick. And we're going to apply some imitation gold leaf foil to the clay. If you haven't come across gold leaf before, this stuff is brilliant. It is super fine and super delicate, and it just sort of tears off. So I'm being really careful not to waste any. I'm just going to I wanted to cover the whole thing, but it wasn't cooperating. So we're just going to do this bit here, and I'm just going to smooth the foil onto the clay so that it's bonded nicely before we're going to roll it out. Now, it doesn't matter that it hasn't covered it completely, because when I cut my shapes out of it, I can just work around those green areas. Right, there we go. So it's nice and shiny. And I'm just going to get my roller. And so what's going to happen is, as I stretch the clay out, it's going to stretch the foil, giving it that nice crackle look. So that looks really pretty. I made some pieces over on Instagram using this technique the other week. So if you're over on Insta, scroll back through my reels and you'll see a pair of earrings that I made using this exact technique with the foil and the clay. Now, once again, I want this paste to be quite thin, so I'm just rolling it down super fine. Obviously, the more thinner you roll the green, the more that foil is going to crackle and the more space within it's going to have. Right, so I've collected up a bunch of these smaller cutters here that don't get much love, mainly just because they are smaller in shape, and I just tend to go for more the medium-sized cutters. But today they are going to get used. So what I'm going to do to start with is I need to bond each of these clays to the tile. Now, because these cutters are smaller in the internal space is smaller, and because the polymer clay is now quite thin, it means that there's a higher chance that the clay is going to get stuck within those cutters, and then we've got to try and poke it out, and it can get messy and frustrating. So the easiest way to try and avoid this happening is to bond the clay to the tile. So that's one of the main reasons that I like working on a ceramic tile, is so that I can bond the clay to it. So I'm going to get each of the cutters, and what I'm also going to do is give them a little wiggle around, and that's going to help to put a bit of a gap between the clay and the cutter. Now, I don't mind if these shapes aren't exactly perfect, because we're going to be tiling them onto that base piece, and they can be a little bit imperfect, a little bit irregular. That's totally fine. Now, if you do have issues with your clay getting stuck in the cutters, there are definitely some different ways that you can help to get them out. So I'm just using the back of the knife here just to try and push it through a little bit. Sometimes I'll come from the underneath and try and push it up. Some people like to use corn flour. I'm not a huge fan of that. I've done it once or twice. I get in a big mess and I don't like it, so I don't do that. I prefer just to poke them out. If the piece gets ruined, I'll just cut another one, or if it leaves a big dent, I can just cut it in half and then just use half of that shape. I cut as many of those shapes out as I could. I've also cut a few little circles out as well. There was a few gaps, so I thought might as well just do some circles. And yeah, just going to peel all the scraps away and pop them to the side just in case I need to cut some more shapes out afterwards. So I'm going to use my flexi blade to help remove these from the tile. So I've talked about my flexi blade before. It's a flexible blade that allows me to bend it and scrape it underneath the pieces to separate them from the tile. Because we bonded that original clay down onto the tile, the pieces are now stuck, so that worked well, but now we've got to lift them up. So just by scraping the blade underneath of them, it rises them up without damaging the pieces. So once I have removed all of these pieces from the tile, I'm going to give them all a little bit of a tidy up. So because we're going to be layering them onto a piece, I'm not going to be able to sand them once cured or tidy them up after they're on. So this means that the majority of cleanup has to be done before I place them on to that base. So I'm just going to give a smooth around the edges before we move on to the next part. Right, so now that they are all cleaned up and all taken off of the tile, I've popped them on a piece of baking paper here, apart from these ones that just fell off. You've always got to have some that are being tricky. Anyway, popping them back on the paper so that I can move them to the side and grab them as I need them. Right, so we're going to grab our pink base back again, and I'm just going to, I'm actually going to move this so that it's a bit easier to get. And we're going to start tiling each of those shapes onto the pink. So as I place them down, I'm just going to do it really loosely. Loosely, I suppose I mean gently. I'm not going to put any pressure onto them. That's what I mean. So I'm just going to place them on so that way I can move them about afterwards if I'm not happy with their placement. So sometimes when I do this kind of thing, I will continue to move them around so many times because I want to make sure that I fit in as much as I possibly can, and I also want to make sure that the pattern doesn't look strange, if that makes sense. So one of the things that I decided to change was that I wanted each of these pieces to be straight. So it's probably not straight for you guys camera wise, but straight for me as I was doing it. I wanted pieces either going up and down or sideways. So not on that angle that I had that little green, it looks like a leaf, but yeah, that little green piece. So I've just changed it a little bit. Now these pieces are also being really tricky because they are thin. So that is the disadvantage with them being thin. They just want to stick, and I don't want to get them caught on my fingers or caught with the knife even and distort that shape too much. So yeah, they're being a little bit tricky. So hopefully it isn't frustrating to watch. So feel free at this point to skip ahead a couple of minutes to the end of this slab placement, or you can continue to watch me place it all out. I won't add any music, so just enjoy the silence for those few minutes. Now, just because it's quite silent at the moment whilst I'm working on it, thought I'd share this little fun fact with you, and that is the whole entire time that I started working on this, all I could think of is that it was reminding me of those ice creams, Buffalo Bill. I don't know if it's doing the same for you guys, but I don't know if it's the colours, but yeah. So now I feel like ice cream. So now that I am happy with all my placement, I'm just going to pull out a bit of baking paper and place that on top. So I like to do this, I suppose it's a little trick. It just helps to keep the pieces in place as I smooth them down. So I'm just, firstly you use my hand, and then now I'm just smoothing the roller over the top. And the purpose of this isn't to squish the pieces down, it is more just to bond them together. Because I just loosely placed them before, now I want them to stay. So that just helps to put them into position and so they hold place. So for the first part of the slab, we used the smaller shape cutters that I don't use often. Now I'm going to use the larger shape cutters that I don't use often. So for me personally, these ones are generally too large to do earrings with, so they just kind of sit on my shelf and don't get a lot of love. So this slab is going to be the time that I use them. I've also pulled out this little red circle cutter. I use that one all the time, but I think I may need to fill some gaps. I also have a smaller one on hand as well. So I'm going to cut as many shapes out of this as I can with these larger shape cutters. I'm aiming to use up as much as I possibly can with the least amount of wastage. So wish me luck, let's get cutting it out and we'll see how many shapes I can cut out of it. Now, I must admit, I actually really like this slab the way it is. I will be redoing this slab in future because, yeah, I just really like the shapes and patterns. The one thing that I did forget to do though, I missed the step and I should have done it. I should have textured some of these colours. So usually I would texture that buddy yellow colour because it did pick up a slight amount of dirt and colour transfer, and by texturing it, it would have helped to hide that. But anyway, it doesn't matter. We can always do it either later, or I will remember to do it next time that I do this slab. So I've cut out as many pieces as I can there, and I'm just going to pull away that skeleton, and I'm just going to chuck it to the side in case I can use some bits afterwards. And once again, just using that flexi blade to release these pieces from the tile, and just going to smooth along the edges as well. Much the same as before. These once again will be layered, so they do need to be neatened up before we go and put them on our next base. And this one just needs neating up with the scalpel knife. So just chop off those little scrappy bits. Okay, so it is time to bring back our second base. So this is the black paste that I rolled out earlier. And once again, we're going to take those pieces that we cut and we're going to tile them onto this base. So I kind of kept changing my mind as I was placing these ones down. So same as last time, just sitting them gently on so that I can move them around. I'm a little bit indecisive with this one. I think because I didn't have a lot of pieces to work with, so it made it a little bit harder to tile them all in without having too much blank black space, too much gaps. So it did come in handy that I had a couple of those other little circles as well that I'm able to just pop into those positions there. So once I'm happy with this positioning, I'm once again going to grab that piece of baking paper and give it a little smooth down. Again, just bonding those larger pieces to the black base so that they won't move anywhere. So as much as I love this little slab that we have worked on, there is a few things that I would like to do differently next time. The texturing being one, maybe making it a little bit bigger so that I have some more pieces to fill the gaps. But anyway, what I've decided to do with this one is turn it into one of my reference slabs. So I've spoken before about reference slabs. What I like to do is occasionally do up a slab, just like this one, that I'm not actually going to cut earring pieces out of. And what I'm going to do is just bake it up as is. And then in future, when I'm looking for inspiration and ideas, I have this one to reference back to and take some inspo from. So I've just trimmed down those black edges so that they don't go to waste. If I was to cut some pieces, I'd probably use a shape similar to this one. This would give me a good range of the colours within it, and I can position that little internal U shape in the bits that I want to avoid. So that brings me to the end of this little slab tutorial today. So hopefully it has inspired you to use some of your smaller and larger, lesser used shape cutters. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye for now.